Today is Monday, August 24th, 2015, and this is episode 129 of the Defensive Security Podcast. My name is Jerry Bell, and joining me tonight is Mr. Andrew Callett.
Good evening, Jerry. How are you, sir?
I'm doing very well. How are you?
I am good.
Seems like we were just doing this.
It does. This is weird.
Yeah.
But it's all good.
Yeah, just
it's been a while since we've done like an official real news podcast, and a lot of things have happened.
That is very true. So we have a lot of catching up to do.
It's true.
So just to start things off, a reminder, the thoughts and opinions we express on this show are ours and do not represent those of our employers. So next order of business is I am going to be at the High Tech Crime Investigation Association conference coming up. Actually, it's the week after next. Can't believe it's here already. So
nice.
If you are going, I hope to see you there. I may or may not have some surprises.
I'm sorry I can't join you. I will be in Michigan for a family event.
However, we will both be at DerbyCon, right?
That's true, and probably even together. You know, we may actually hang out outside the show.
That's true. If I'm cool enough for you. I don't know if I've crossed that level yet.
Well, you know, the bar is being raised as we meet more and more cool listeners.
True. That's true.
You're coming in from, where are you going to be coming from?
I'll be flying in from New York.
All right. So we'll figure out our appearance schedule.
I know.
We'll have to do some sort of listener meetup.
Yeah.
Because that was good times last year.
Oh, it was great times. I really, really loved meeting and talking with the listeners. That was just awesome. Maybe more of them this time, I'm thinking. So we'll see. All right, so let's do this and get into some stories. Feel like we're kind of rusty here. So
yeah, all right, let's do it. Sounds good.
First up comes from the Tripwire State of Security blog. I know by now this is a kind of an old story, but I thought it was worth talking about. So Oracle, the CISO of Oracle, launched what I can only describe as a personally impactful bomb. So Marianne Davidson is the CISO of Oracle, and she posted this really long blog post, and the title of it was let's see, it was no, you really can't. Sorry, and it was all about railing on customers, Oracle customers, who violate the end user license agreement by trying to reverse engineer Oracle products to find vulnerabilities. And obviously, lots of that is done by proxy through, third-party companies, assessment firms. But it went over like a lead balloon in the information security community. And in fact, Oracle later retracted the post and said that it didn't reflect the values of Oracle, and which one would think puts the CISO in an interesting political position, but I will leave that alone. But I will say that this is not a new position, right? This every couple of years, this position comes up and it flares up and is unpopular, and then it goes away for a while, and then it comes back up. Now, it's kind of interesting because this Tripwire blog, I think, is the reason I referenced it versus some of the others, is that it was a little more balanced, right? I think their position is that she has some legitimate concerns, although the net message was really horribly badly received. Probably the most significant of which is the reason, the overall reason that she brought this up, apparently, is that they're getting lots of crappy vulnerability submissions, and that's tying up her team, right? And so they're...
Let me get out my violin.
I know. So anyway, she's using the EULA, the intellectual property protection provisions in the EULA, which prevent reverse engineering of the code, in an effort to protect against this kind of analysis. And she does go on to say in her blog post, which you'll have to find copies of it because it's long gone by now, but she did say that certainly if somebody came forward with an actual bug, they would fix it. However, don't expect to be credited for it, which you can imagine probably didn't go over real well with the community, who prides itself on being credited with finding bugs. So we haven't actually
that actually, by the way, was not even close to my biggest problem with her post. Was that she wouldn't give credit?
Well, go ahead. What was your biggest problem?
The entire tone and attitude behind it.
It was very condescending, right?
It was. It came across as a parent who was scolding their child once again for doing something incorrectly.
Right.
I mean, get your bleep button ready, because seriously, you. I mean, first of all, if they were so excellent at security and they have the moral authority to preach security to anyone, explain Java to me.
Yeah.
So moral outrage aside, sorry, I've got some more thoughts here, but I didn't want to interrupt your flow. But do you want me to hold my...
No, have at it.
Okay.
You're on a roll.
I personally had a visceral reaction to this, but then I took a step back and I looked at it. Okay, let's say I'm an Oracle customer. I may or may not be. I'm not going to confirm nor deny. And I've got the skill set in my environment to audit their code myself, whether I'm reverse engineering, whether I'm fuzzing, whether I'm doing some dynamic code analysis, whatever it may be, and I find problems. So here is in essence what Oracle is saying. You don't know what you're doing. You're an amateur. First of all, you don't know that. I may have incredibly talented folks on my team. I may have the highest top-end pen testers in the world hired to audit something, and they may find something. You don't know. And to assume that you've got the right people on your staff is incorrect and arrogant. And I can assure this because more often than not, manufacturers have this mindset of, it wasn't designed to do that. Why would you do that? Well, guess what? I've seen this over and over and over again, especially out of the academic community. They have these inherent assumptions about the way software and networking and all this stuff functions, and they come up with these ideas that do not survive in the real world because the real world is a lot messier than their controlled lab environment. Back to my point. If I'm running their code and they're telling me you cannot audit our code, does that mean they're going to assume all liability if anything that happens to me? If my company gets hacked based on a problem with Oracle? Because they're basically saying, hands off, you can't do anything that comes to under the hood looking at Oracle security. That's not your place. That's our place. Well, I'm sorry, if I'm running Oracle in my environment, I have a liability that comes with that. Yeah, I may not be able to patch your code, but if I know there's a problem, I might be able to wrap some other mitigating controls around it. I might be able to wrap, web application firewall or something from Imperva that's doing database activity monitoring. I may watch for specific traffic that I know is going to be a problem. I can't just blindly trust Oracle to go off and do that. I want lots of people beating on the code I run. It's one of the reasons I prefer to deploy widely used gear, because the concept is there's a lot more people out there likely spending research time on it to find bugs. But when a vendor comes back to me and says, piss off, you're not good enough to give us bug reports, and we don't want to hear from you, and you're wasting my people's time, I viscerally and logically may not want to run their gear in a secure environment.
That makes it's a logical argument. I can't disagree with that.
And for her to say, oh, it's costing us time, then I don't want to do this. I'm sorry, you're in the software business. You're in a software business that has the highest number of information security vulnerabilities and attacks going on of any time in history. So put on a helmet and get in the game. If you don't like it, get out of the industry, because this is not going to change and it's not going to go away. And your little rant like a spoiled child isn't going to make any differences. If anything, you're going to make it worse.
You know what struck me is that they ought to be focusing on more productive ways of handling the problem. Like, I've heard that actually paid bug bounties are a way to filter out the noise, right? Because you end up with number one, a formal program rather than people just emailing whoever. I can only imagine how their bug reports come in. And number two, you're going to get people who are reporting actual things. Now, it's going to cost you money. I get the feeling that they're just looking for a net drop in the overall cost associated with this, which is really not going to happen. They have a huge portfolio of products. One thing that, kind of like you said, that I really reacted badly to was that she had said in her article that Oracle is in the best place. Oracle's developers are in the best place to be performing these audits. However, time and time again, we find, especially things like Java, but also some other products that Oracle makes, are vulnerable to 0 days. Well, that was found by somebody else, right? And so every time a 0 day in an Oracle product is found, that was one that did not get found by Oracle. Period. End of story. Let's move on from there. And look at how many patches come out on an Oracle's. I think they're quarterly patch updates. I mean, there are usually hundreds. It's it's expansive.
You make a great point. And one thing you just said that triggered a thought in my brain is, think about the internal politics of calling the baby ugly by having an internal team find bugs. Yeah. Do you think there might be some subtle pushback to not dig too deep in the code for problems?
I would imagine that there are complex incentives at play that could yield less than optimal results for customers.
Yeah. So they should be thanking the InfoSec community for doing these code audits, not railing against them.
Yeah, I really do think that they and others need to think fundamentally differently about this, the space, because kind of, someone had posted a really great picture. I wish I would have bookmarked it, but basically it was the scene from The Wizard of Oz where Dorothy and her companions were in the wizard's room, and you could see in the corner the curtain, and it's just, don't look behind the curtain. That's what they want you to do. Just don't look behind the curtain. And the other thing that the kind of the subtitle or the subtext of the article was, at some point, dear customer, we may choose to start exercising our rights in the contract against you. And I got to thinking about that. If you get breached using an Oracle product, right? that means that someone in your system was improperly using the Oracle product. They were violating the EULA of software that you bought, and by virtue of them accessing it, you facilitated access to them. Technically, their exploitation of the product violated your EULA, your agreement to use the software, which is completely ridiculous. Totally, yeah. I'm not a lawyer, but if you play that out to the end, it's ridiculous.
So what are they going to do? Start telling customers we're not going to renew you or yanking your license? That's going to go over well.
Yeah, I can't. I don't think they would.
I'd call their bluff on that.
I don't think they would.
What I'd love to see is somebody like an IBM or a Google or some other huge company that might have a lot of Oracle licensing publicly call them out and tell them to go themselves. Yeah. And bring it. What are you going to do? Your salespeople make, $100 million off us a year. What are you going to do? Let's go. Let's dance.
Yeah.
And because
they're not. I mean, they're not. they're not going to throw that money in the toilet.
No.
There's no way.
It's just such arrogance, and it's very frustrating, especially from the company that owns Java.
Yeah.
If anything, they should be begging for forgiveness.
Oh, anyway, let's move on from that one. It's horrible.
Sorry. One last thing. If you
Go
want
ahead.
some fun on this, go do a Twitter search for the hashtag Oracle FanFic.
Oh,
Oracle,
God.
FANFIC. I contributed a few myself, but they're hilarious posts ripping on Oracle. And I really want those to continue because they need to feel the pain. And I promise you right now, their crisis management and marketing folks are saying, just ignore it, it'll pass. Just ignore it, it'll pass. It's up to us to keep this alive.
Keep it going, people. All right, so
If anyone from Oracle would like to come on our show and defend themselves, we invite you.
well, that'll be fun.
We will not edit. We will let you talk. We will let you make your complete points, but we will also make our points.
That's right. All right, so moving on. Our next story comes from Ars Technica, and the title is "My browser visited weather.com, and all I got was this lousy malware." And there's still a pervasive misunderstanding, I should say, that you have to click on links on these ads in order to get infected. And even, by the way, that misunderstanding exists among information security people, some that I have met. And so I just want to take a moment and reflect upon this, right? So we had a case here where weather.com, drudgereport.com, weatherunderground.com, and later some other sites were publishing malicious advertisements. And basically the way this works is there's an iframe injection, and there's a link, by the way, in this post that goes through goes over to Malwarebytes blog, and they actually go through a very detailed dissection of the attack. But basically, they're injecting this ad is injecting code into your browser that is exploiting, in this case, Adobe Flash, which, by the way, was a already patched problem in Flash, which would in turn drop some malware on your system. All you had to do was visit the website. Don't need to click on anything. Just visit the website.
And by the way, considered safe websites.
Yes.
Well known, probably let through your proxy, nothing scary websites.
Not pornography, not Where sites, not BitTorrent sites, weather.com, right? This is
amongst others. We're not just picking on weather.com.
Yeah, and by the way, this was not weather.com's. They were not involved in this. They weren't hacked. They weren't, it was that they subscribed to an ad network and the ad network wasn't hacked either, right?
You could say the ad network needs to do a better job of filtering malicious ads.
We can definitely say that.
Yeah.
However, it's so I think that the net point is in another podcast, Patrick Gray's Risky Business. There was an absolutely awesome quote. He and the Grok were kind of bantering back and forth about this one, and I forget which one of them said it, but they basically said, right now, browsing the internet without an ad blocker is kind of like riding the internet bareback. So, which by the way is really unfortunate, because I think ultimately this is going to kill. Probably is going to, at the very least, materially harm the online advertising industry, and it's going to force some changes. I don't know in what direction.
I'll be honest with you. I put some notes in here about that too. That I think there's websites out there that already guilt trip you about running an ad blocker. I think FARC for one. I'm trying to think of a few others. Reddit. You're right.
Yep.
Reddit does. But I'm sorry. I can't risk it. Until this problem is solved and there's no longer an infection vector from advertising, I'm going to block them. And until I can be promised, and it's borne out in experience, that there's no more malicious ads coming. In other words, get rid of Flash, get rid of Java, get rid of everything other than static pictures. I'm going to keep blocking them. And if that means websites that run on ads can no longer survive, frankly, so be it. I'm not asking them to, survive without advertising revenue, but at the same time, I'm not going to take the risk. If that means that we have to come up with a different model and that these free websites are going to go away, I understand that is the trade-off. And that is how capitalism works. It's about creative destruction. And ultimately, though, I think the vast majority of people are not going to run ad blockers. I think this is a 5 percentile thing. But if it does hurt their business revenue, they're going to have to adapt, or something's going to radically change. But I don't expect them to run for free. I expect them to make money. I'm not expecting them to serve up anything for me. But
yeah,
the other thing that I heard just yesterday, I think Amazon has announced it will no longer accept Flash ads in its ad network,
which is a great move. I think that may, in fact, be a move in the direction that helps that line of business survive. So, anyway, there's not a ton to say. We've talked about these malvertising campaigns in the past. There's nothing really particularly novel about this, except I'll say that the ads are being tunneled over TLS now, and so in the past it's been a little easier to see them with some of your border stuff. So you would, and my listeners will be happy to point out that you can, in fact, still, decrypt at the border. You just have to, properly configure it. But in any respect, it takes a little more sophistication if you're going to try to look for it at the network layer. So,
yeah.
Moving on to another Ars Technica story, we have attackers actively exploit Windows bug that uses USB sticks to infect PCs. So,
man, it's like auto run all over again.
So it's interesting, right? Because once auto run went away, a lot of the panic and whatnot around USB drives went away. And it became much less of a focus for things like security awareness training campaigns and whatnot, because it became much less of a threat. But this is the same, by the way, same bug class that Stuxnet used, right? And who knows? There's quite potentially a lots more like this. Point is, this, by the way, was being actively exploited, right? So they found evidence of active exploitation of this. It does require physical access or somebody to physically install the USB drive in the computer. However, you label a USB drive with an FBI logo and drop it in the parking lot, and whoever finds it's going to plug it into their computer, no questions asked. It just will happen. So
my thought on this is some organizations block USB ports from having the ability to copy files on and off, right, for DLP purposes. I wonder if those controls limited this attack vector or not. I'd love to test that.
I don't think so. I think this is a very low-level Windows code. It's the mount manager.
Yeah, so probably not.
No, I could be wrong, but I don't. Obviously I haven't tested it, but I suspect that it's just bad news, right? So anyway, point is, still got to worry about USB drives. Still got to warn people against picking things up. You still got to warn people against plugging their computer into the stupid USB drives that people have put in walls. What the hell is with that? I don't. Have you seen this, by the way?
I have. I think it's a wonderful social experiment.
Whatever. What the hell is wrong with people?
There's an outtake clip right there.
All right, so let's go to our next story. This is also from ours, and oh my goodness, this is a bucket of fail like I've not seen in a while. So Lenovo, who has had just a stellar reputation lately, yet again took the pooch and screwed it.
That poor dog.
Poor doggy. So what happened here is Lenovo has this thing they call the Lenovo Service Engine, and for about 5 or 6 months they were pumping out laptops that had a BIOS feature, which is called the Windows Platform Binary Table. This is a magical little thing that is intended to support anti-theft programs like CompuTrace, which many of us are familiar with CompuTrace, right? But not a lot of us understand under the hood, how does that work? Well, the way it works is ACPI, the later versions of BIOS and whatnot, has this Windows Platform Binary Table concept where the BIOS manufacturers can effectively create, a space in BIOS with a application, with basically a binary, right? And if that binary exists when Windows boots up, Windows is hard coded at boot to pull down that binary and run it. If the binary doesn't already exist, it's hard coded to pull down that binary and run it. And
that's by design in Windows.
It's by design in Windows. This is not like not like a hack. That is the way it's supposed to work. And you can imagine, if your laptop's been stolen, you want that CompuTrace code to run so it beacons home and you can get your computer back. That's how it's supposed to work.
Legitimate good purposes for this.
That's how it's supposed to work. However, Lenovo use that against the terms of service, by the way, that Microsoft allows the use of this Windows Platform Binary Table, and they use it to install this wonderful piece of code, and it was it's called One Key Optimizer, which Ars Technica probably rightly calls crapware. As far as I can tell, it reminds me of like the CC cleaner. It sounds kind of bad. However, apparently had a vulnerability, right? It itself had a vulnerability. However, it's built into your BIOS. You can't upgrade it. And so anyways, people called out Lenovo on this, and they pushed out BIOS updates for the affected systems. And in order to make this thing go away, you actually have to refresh BIOS, which is just absolutely amazing. And we've talked in the past about things like bad BIOS and and others, but when you think about the implications of the things that can be done at the BIOS level, it's pretty damn scary.
It is. Two thoughts I had on this is, do you think their government contracts just took a bit of a hit?
I would not be surprised.
If I am in charge of procurement for U.S. government, I would be telling Lenovo to pound sand. The other thing I like is that this was found by a user in the field, and that's the way it should be. We should not be just randomly trusting this stuff. We should be examining this stuff, and I like that that's happening. I mean, I like the idea of all these people taking Windows 10 and sniffing the hell out of it to see what it phones home with and what it does. And, I love the concept of taking fresh gear and setting it up and watching what it does on the wire. I mean, that's how we find this crap. So kudos to them for finding it. And trust but verify is a powerful phrase for these things.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, we have to recognize that underneath the covers, there's a whole other computer, at least one other computer running inside your computer that you often don't have visibility to or access to.
And back in the day, we weren't necessarily worried about this because the code size was pretty small. But now all I need is a downloader.
Right.
Because the assumption, and it's probably true 90% of the time, is this box is online.
Right.
And all I need to do is get a downloader.
Yep.
And then I can go to town.
That's right.
Which is pretty damn scary.
Yeah. and that will persist across across reinstallations or anything. The only thing that it will not persist across is if you reinstall a different OS like Linux, which lots of people in the wake of this thing said, well, haha, another.
Yeah, that's
another
great
vote.
if I have an enterprise with 20,000 Windows boxes. What do you got for me now?
Exactly.
Smart ass. And that's the problem. I mean, okay, I'm being snarky, but legitimately, when that is the reply of people who think they're an InfoSec, well, you should have been running Windows to begin with. They don't understand the needs of an enterprise. And it's not helpful to say that. At a personal level, sure, great, fine. But when I've got 20,000 people, come on, give me something else.
Yeah. Someday I'll describe my experience with running. I don't know. A lot of people probably don't know it, right? But me and my part of the business where I work run Linux on our workstations, and it's it's quite an experience. So
it's a viable plan, but that's not something you do overnight.
You got to have a huge commitment, and my company is extraordinarily committed to this, and they probably pay a lot more than most companies would be willing to support this and make it work. So anyway.
To be clear, just so my point isn't misunderstood, I'm not saying you can't run Linux in the enterprise. I'm saying you can't just knee-jerk into it.
Yeah, it's not exactly. It's not this is not a decision to be taken lightly. That's a 5 or 10 year plan.
Right.
That's a long-term strategy discussion, and it might not be the right strategy discussion, right? So, the more simple manner may just be use a different hardware vendor that you trust.
That's true.
All right, well, let's move on to our last story for the night. This one is awesome. This is just awesome. So this comes from the University of Michigan's social media blog. And now they were hacked a couple of weeks ago. And their Facebook page, I should say, was hacked a couple of weeks ago. And defaced and all that, and they kind of wrote up a really nice decomposition of what happened, and the intent is for others to learn from what happened to them, which I think is just phenomenal. Kudos to them, love it. So wanted to talk a little bit about their experience and their lessons. So. Back on August 12th of this year, in the middle of the night, a bunch of their different Facebook pages got defaced. And so U of M is a very prominent school. If you're not familiar with it, most people are. It's a huge college here in the U.S. and have lots of visitors. Anyway, they were defaced. The first obstacle they bumped up against is that they realized they didn't have a way to contact Facebook, right? So after they started getting lots of complaints about this, and they had lost access to their account, they couldn't log in and clean it up, and so I like the way they put it. You would think that I think the sixth largest educational institution in the nation may have a Facebook on speed dial, but we don't. And that's an interesting point. And I wonder how many organizations do. So, point number one for me, or takeaway number one for me, is if you have a large if social media is part of your organization, it's part of your brand, you probably want to think through this. How would you contact Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and whoever else you use? How would you contact them to take back your account if that were to happen? So anyway, they leveraged some contacts they had, and they ended up getting in touch with Facebook's London office because, again, it was in the middle of the night here. A couple of hours later, Facebook helped them take back their account. By 10 a.m., they had kind of declared the all clear. I don't think they were completely done cleaning it up. And then 2 hours later, got hacked again.
So backing up, do we know how the first hack happened, or how.
Yeah, and so
Okay.
so in the process of figuring out how they lost access the second time, they actually figured out what happened the first time. So what ended up being the cause here is that one of their employees who has administrative access to these pages was phished, and was basically phished with a pretty good phish, and they include some samples in the link, and took them to a page which looked like the Facebook login page where they were supposed to revalidate their login information. Of course, it was fake, and then the attackers were off to the races. So what happened, obviously, the first time around was they used those credentials to get in, change the pages, remove access to the normal administrators, and whatnot. The second time around, after cleaning up the account, they had stripped out all of the administrators, and then they started adding them back in. Well, when they added this one person back in whose account had been compromised, they then granted the attacker who had access to that account back into the privileged access of these Facebook pages, and went at it again. And that is really interesting to me, and something I think we have to think about. This is this person's personal Facebook account, right?
Right.
That person's personal Facebook account was delegated administrative privileges on this, enterprise. You see, obviously it's a university, right? But this large organization's Facebook page, and we often fret about protecting our internal accounts and things like that. But here's a situation where this is the person's personal account, and that personal account has administrative rights over our organization's sensitive applications, if you can consider Facebook to be that. Obviously, they wrote a story, so they consider
Well, it certainly has some reputational impact.
Absolutely.
And some of the stuff that was being posted was highly sexual in nature, so there could potentially be some liability.
Yeah. They actually do go through a bit of an analysis about how many followers they lost and gained and things like that. And basically, they lost a few, but not many, and they got lots of mentions, which I guess if you're in social media, you like mentions, I suppose. But one of their core finding was that you've got to get away from single factor authentication, which again is no big surprise. But again, it kind of hurts my mind to think about situations where we've got people's personal accounts being used in an organizational context, and how do you require a person on their personal account to use two-factor authentication? And I'm not saying that you can't. I'm just saying that there's some interesting implications here that we need to think about when we're setting up things like this, and how we're going to go delegate permissions and whatnot.
Yeah, I agree.
And so, by the way, I started thinking about, like, I got an Apple Mac recently for work. I know I just said Linux, right? But I recently got an Apple Mac, and I got to thinking, and I'm not going to answer the question here, right? But do I use my own Apple account, or do I create one with my work ID? And there's really there's not a great answer there, right? There's not, you can't easily force me to use my my work account. So anyway, and what are the implications there, right? So as we become as a society more and more socially enabled and distributed, these kinds of implications are going to be harder and harder, I think, to tack down, and we just have to keep an eye out for it.
Yeah, and we go back to the same thing. You should war game these things out. And have a plan before this happens. If you're very reliant on social media, don't just let your marketing folks own that. You probably should get involved with trying to figure out what are you going to do if something happens.
Right.
One thing that we see a lot in this particular case didn't come up, but third-party apps can often be granted access to post. And what sometimes the attackers will do is once they get in, they'll start granting third-party apps permission. So even if you change the password, they can still post. And that's the kind of stuff that it's worth knowing about ahead of time and having a plan for.
Right. Yeah, they've created an OAuth binding. Yeah, it's a great point. It's a really good point. And I think it's doubly complex because, like you said, this is not part of your normal traditional IT infrastructure. It's just a Facebook page, right? It's not something that your IT group has responsibility for.
And it may be, outsourced.
Oh, that's a great point. I think the Army, wasn't it the Army that got hacked? Their Facebook account got hacked, and it turned out it was a subcontractor they used to manage their social media presence. So, yeah, absolutely. It's a great point. So, anyway, I thought it was a really interesting article, well worth the read, some interesting perspective and lessons learned there. Hopefully you find it useful. And with that, I think we're at the end of the show.
Indeed, a good show. Thanks for all the good stories, Jerry. Hopefully our fans or our listeners or our folks who may become fans or whomever enjoyed them and find use out of them. We appreciate your time spending with us, and hopefully this helped your day or commute or whatever it is you do while you listen to us go a little easier.
Absolutely. And by the way, thanks again to our Patreon donors. And I know that the presents that we've sent out are starting to arrive. I need to go through and do another wave. So we've had some more donors since I asked for addresses, and I'll be doing that. If you like the show, give us some love on iTunes. That helps us creep above the Drupal show that ended years ago, which
iTunes ranking is beyond human understanding.
I know, it's a joke. I joke, but anyway, seriously, lots of people have left comments, and I appreciate all of you who have done that. You can find links to all the stories we've talked about on our website, www.defensivesecurity.org. You can find the show on Twitter at DefensiveSec. You can follow Mr. Callan on Twitter at Lurg and me on Twitter at MaliciousLink. And with that, we will talk again next week. Thanks.
Have a great week, everybody. See ya. Bye.
Bye.
Sorry, I had the mute thing on. I didn't realize it.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.
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 Bye-bye.